Cool. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session this morning. If you haven't seen my face before, my name's Eve. I'm the Member Services Manager here at WOLN, and I'd also like to welcome Vanessa, who's joining us today from the WOLN team as well. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on beautiful Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I consider myself extremely fortunate to be able to work on and restore this beautiful country. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend a deep respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call today. I acknowledge their ongoing connection to land, sea, and sky as the world's oldest continuous living culture. Please acknowledge what country you are on in the chat function. I'd love to see the diversity of what land we're all calling in from today. So, thank you all for joining us this morning. I'd like to welcome our speakers for today, Deb Slater and Elissa Forbes, and extend our thanks and gratitude to the organisation who they represent, DPERD, who fund a lot of the incredible landcare work across the state and are the reason why we're all gathered here today. So first up, Deb has worked in the ecological space for the past 25 years with an academic background in marine science. She has a strong understanding of the critical role that community and volunteers play in supporting conservation initiatives, and she's a passionate advocate for environmental conservation at the grassroots level. Currently, Deb is the program manager of the state NRM team, the principal funding body for WA Landcare. Deb knows a good Landcare story and a good project when she sees one, and she's going to walk us through the updated guidelines for this year. Now, I'm going to share screen for Deb, and I'm going to hand over to her for this morning.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yep, great. Okay, thank you for inviting me along today, Eve, and WOLN. Really appreciate the opportunity to share our grants program, and also to just give you guys an opportunity to meet us, so that for those of you who don't know us, to realise that we're actually really not scary at all, and that we're extremely approachable, and that we absolutely have your best interests at heart. So, there's a twofold for this. Okay, I'm going to, Eve's... For those of you who attended last year, I had an absolute disaster with technology. So Eve has very kindly agreed to manage my technical challenges.
My pleasure.
Right. So thank you for doing that acknowledgement. We're also doing that short one there. Next. Okay, for some of you who have played in this space for a while, this is going to be a little bit boring, but I just wanted to very quickly touch on what we are, and, probably more importantly, what we're not. So the program was actually designed when the BILAT finished in 2009, and it was to fill that gap, to enable community groups to continue participating in the NRM space. So we're in a somewhat of a unique position in that we fund the whole state and a whole range of issues. So we have a pretty good understanding of what goes on in the NRM space and landcare space across the state. So since the 2025 grants, I just want to be really upfront about this. We have experienced a number of challenges. We've changed position in the department. So we're currently sitting with climate resilience, which I actually think is a much better fit for our program. But what that has come with is a few teething problems to, understand, what this new space looks like, working with different people. We also had a little bit of a staffing crisis at the end of last year, where my team of 6 or 7 was down to 1.5. So there has been a few delays in the program. We also had a late announcement last year. So this year we're trying to bring our cycle back in so that we have an early announcement of the program, and also an early announcement of the successful programs, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. Next, please. Okay, over the past 8 years, sorry, I think we've got a bit of an echo.
That's okay. Let me have a look.
Over the past 8 years, yeah, that's better. We've given out quite a bit of money, and most of that is through royalties for regions. So, you know, very important contribution to this space. And we've helped a lot of people, a lot of grassroots, for-profit and volunteer groups. Next, please. Okay, so let's get on to the community stewardship grants. So you guys will have noticed that they're already open, and you'll also notice that they're closing a little bit earlier, and that's why I wanted to bring that up. It's quite compared to other years, it's a little bit shorter than normal. However, that's to get us our cycle back on track so that we can have an early announcement so that you guys can order your seedlings and do all the things that is really important that we do in a timely manner. So 29th of April is the due date, and I'm going to mention this multiple times, but the Community Stewardship Grants Guidelines, they are your best friend. Please read them again, read them 1,000 times. Next. Okay, so we have 2 rounds. The small rounds valued up to $50,000, and they're up to 18 months duration. Large grants, obviously up to 450. They leave off where the 50,000 and up to 36. Obviously, the smalls are designed for some of those smaller groups or small sort of discrete projects, whereas the large are intended obviously to go over more years and to be more strategic, complex projects. There is a small gap in between where sometimes you need a little bit more, but it's actually only a small. But yeah, that's actually the cutoff that we've designed, and it works mostly reasonably well. Next. All right. Now, we've been asked over the years, you know, how we actually do these assessments. As a legacy of, you know, when we used to have a bilateral agreement and the program was actually overseen by an NRM ministerial council, this is a legacy of that. So we have 3 ministers, water, environment and ag, the ag being the lead. And each of those ministers nominate 2 people, one from the community and one from internal. So those 6 people actually sit on the panel. It's such an interesting process because you have a lot of information actually in the room. It starts off with a quantitative process where the grants are, each grant is and actually I'm going to stop because I'm getting ahead of my slides. We also have a number of reference groups that provide us with additional technical support. And we also have experts within the department, particularly around feral animals, that we can draw on to get expert advice. The small grants are 3 panel members and a chair. And the chair is non-voting, by the way, is independent. And we also use the reference groups for those. Okay, next please. I'm going to try and race through these. So Lissa's got heaps of time. We've got time for questions. So this is the critical path. As you can see, we are aiming for a September/October announcement to try and pull that time frame back in so that we've got good time to order seedlings. But the other thing as well is that internally, we are usually contracting. Once the projects are announced, we're then contracting. At the moment, we're contracting and we've got a grant round open. So it puts extra pressure on the team as well. Don't take too many notes. It will be available for you to look at later as well. Next, please. Okay, so this is our assessment criteria. So clear NRM outcomes, 30% evidence of local community involvement. This part is really important. They are community stewardship grants, and that includes engagement with Aboriginal people. That's 30%. Well justified, value for money, really important, 30%. And then sound planning and ability to manage the project. Some of that actually comes from your ability to put in a really good application. If we can see that your application has been well thought through, all of the stuff's provided, then that's one indication that you are very capable of planning and managing and delivering the project. Next. Okay, so in 2024-25, we actually did a review. Some of you will be aware of this because we made some changes to the limits. However, we haven't upped those at all this year, but this is just for for people who haven't been engaged with us last year. So there were some changes, and if you can just next, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that's what the changes were. So you can see the upper limits for some of the things have gone up. For those of you who applied or were interested last year, there's been no change, but I just wanted to let people know that hadn't been engaged with us since 2024. You will also note that some of the changes to the governance around the smalls has been loosened off significantly as well. So for the small grants, there's less reporting requirements. There's still some reporting in there, obviously, but it's not as onerous as the largest. Next. Okay, this is actually really important. Conflict of interest is absolutely not going to necessarily stop you from being considered. What will happen, what I can guarantee though, if you don't declare something, that can be a deal breaker. So even if you're not sure, put it in. You know, we'll look at it and go, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Or you know, if there is something, it's not necessarily a deal breaker either. It might mean that we put some conditions in place to manage that conflict. But yeah, really important component. Next, please. All right, the other thing that's really important is telling the story. We all love a story. Everyone does. So learn to do it well. And one of the things to remember is when people are assessing, they're often working full time. They're doing it later at night. They're tired. Make it easy for us to engage someone. Don't put onerous, hard language in there. Don't put academic language in it. Say it, write it like you would say it, so that you're actually telling the story, and engage a tired, grumpy person. You know, it's really important to actually manage that. And, you know, there's lots of workshops around telling the story and how to do it better. But the best advice that I can give you is just say it like you would speak it. You know, actually, all right, something's coming up on my screen. Okay, next, please. Okay, so, and then obviously once you've told that story, then you do all your supporting stuff. Think outside the square. You know, it doesn't have to be just the usual suspects I've got there, but, you know, photos, maps, newspaper articles, things to support. You know, if you've got a list of landholders that are really keen to engage with you, include it. You know, that shows evidence that what you're proposing to do is well supported by your community. So, you know, we're really happy to talk to you about what any of that evidence might look like. But yeah, it's really around, I've made a claim, we want money for this, and this is why we need it. Next, please. Now, value for money. This is where some of us come unstuck. Demonstrate is the key word. So quotes really do help. We've got in the application, in the guidelines, that they're not necessary, and they're not a deal breaker. However, if you're coming up against, you know, you're scoring roughly the same as someone else, and they've got quotes that evidence the ask, and you don't, that can often be the difference between you getting funding and not. So we also understand that when you put a quote in, in April, and you're not being advised until September or October that you've been successful, that quote will have changed. And we're really happy to work with you when we're contracting, but at least the quote shows that you've actually done the work. You've done your homework. You know that this is a rough amount for what is going to be required. So quotes, really important. Sorry, someone's trying to call me. I'm just getting rid of them. Okay, really important as well, if you're asking for funds for salaries, you absolutely must say what they're going to be doing. Just putting in, 100,000 for an officer, and they're going to be doing a workshop and maybe going out on country a few times. That doesn't justify one full FTE. All right, we actually need to see all the things that person's going to be doing to go, oh yeah, that's a lot of effort. Okay, yes, that is one FTE worth of activity that person is going to be overseeing. And the secret to that is putting it in the work plan, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So as I said, the salary, if you don't have that detail, then that starts to impinge on your value for money score. The other thing is we've got guidelines and we've got limitations to that, but we know that, for instance, I think it's $4 a stem now. We know that sedges are way more expensive. So if you're considering a project that's going to be planting a bunch of sedges, then you can apply for more. You just need to justify it. You just need to say sedges are significantly more expensive. If you're fencing, an area that's really tough to get to, and you need a contractor, and floppy top fences are a classic. If you're trying to keep feral cats out and you're building a floppy top fence, that's going to be a lot more than the limitation. So you just justify what it is that you're asking for, and then obviously provide evidence. Next, please. All right, the work plan. I can tell you as an assessor that I would spend at least 50% of my time on this work plan. It's really, really critical. If I have to go looking for things, it's going to make me kind of question the project and its integrity. There's a pro tip down the bottom. There's word limits in the application form, because otherwise, hundreds of applications, we would be reading novels for each application. However, there's no word limit in the work plan. So use that as the opportunity to actually provide some of that additional information. You can actually you can see there's an example, you can highlight things to just put a little bit extra in there. Some of the most successful grants are those that provide a very extensive work plan, sometimes almost too much, but there's no such thing as too much. So, the work plan, I reckon spend at least 50% of your time on. Very important. Next, please. Mapping. Amazing. If you, obviously this is a horses for courses. If you are working on a project that's just more about community engagement, and, mapping is not going to necessarily be as an important a component. However, if you're doing any sort of on-ground work, that can actually, it's the old picture tells 1,000 words. That can actually help us understand the site, all of the intricacies and the concerns around the site, can really help us to understand your project, and make sure you label them well. Next, please. Okay, community involvement. This is, again, horses for courses. For some projects, it's going to be really critical. For others, less so, particularly on ground work. We need to know that you have permissions. We need to know that you've consulted with people who might get grumpy about your project. One of my favourite instances of this, and it was down in Albany, where they were looking at cutting down some pines along the King River. And they did a whole bunch of consultation, and with different with the caravan park, with a whole bunch of different people, and that was great. However, there was one landholder who was a bit closer to the river who was not happy because the pines actually stopped the light from the caravan park coming across to their property. So then they had to go back and do that consultation. And so you can't think of everything, but try to think about what the impacts of your project will be. That's just a really weird and probably not entirely appropriate example, but it's a really funny one. I remember talking about it at the time going, oh. But anyway, all right. So whose land does it happen on? Do you have permissions? Does your project include animal welfare? Do you need permissions around that? You basically just need to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's for all of the different components of your project. Next, please. All right, again, use simple language. Talk to us like we're real people. You don't have to impress us. You have to make us understand your project when it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm 12 projects in. Just help me understand your project. Don't be clever. Dot points also help to manage word limits. And if you are using any attachments, if you're referring to anything, just make sure you put it in the text. So for instance, if you're referring to a plan that you want to participate in delivering, then actually include it in the text. So you would say, this project contributes to this plan, in brackets, what the plan is, attached, something like that, so that we know where to go looking for it. And of course, make sure those attachments are properly labelled. So, so we don't have to do any interpretation. Next, please. All right, further information and updates. We have a website, and then you can go through and Facebook also. Next, please. And for further assistance. So I have 4 meetings this afternoon with proponents who want to discuss their applications. And that's part of what I do, is actually have those conversations with people to help you see how well aligned you are with the guidelines, but also to, if you want to talk about something specific about, how likely is this to be accepted, I can give you that advice to the best of my knowledge as well. So if you want to have a one-on-one, by all means, please reach out and try and have at least a draft ready so that we can actually go through your actual project. Do not leave it to the last minute, because that last week I'm going to be absolutely flat out. So I won't be able to give it the time and attention it really needs. One other thing that I actually did forget to say, there is one additional thing in the guidelines that hasn't been there before, and that's an alignment with the state priorities. Please don't get too hung up on that, because you will be doing this anyway. You will be addressing some of those things. But, if you have a look at that, and I think it's early, I can't remember what page it is, might be page 6 or something, early on in the guidelines, that talks about what those priorities are. Try, if you can weave those into your narrative, fabulous. That's actually really great. But please don't get too hung up on it. Again, if you want to discuss how it might look in your application, book in a time with me and I will we can talk it through. So yep, Really important. So going back, just go through the SNRMO. Can you go back one, please? Thank you. So just go in through through our website. Actually, I'll go. Sorry, go forward? I'm looking for my email address. Yay, that one. Thank you. So that email address there, just put that, send a request and we can find a time to have a quick Teams meeting. Thank you. That's me. I've raced through that, so you might have questions, but I'll quickly hand over to Liz, who can go through her presentation on feral cat management, and then hopefully we've got some time to ask some questions at the end.
Perfect. I imagine we will. I'll just do a quick intro for Elissa, who some of you will probably know very well. But Elissa is the Feral Cat Management Grants Coordinator and a project officer for the Community Stewardship Grant with the State NRM program. She has been with the State NRM team for a number of years now, but before that has had a number of NRM roles in both the North Perth and the Great Southern region, ranging from water quality, catchment management, sustainable ag, invasive species control, and dieback management. So she considers herself a bit of a jack of all trades. Being based down in the Great Southern region, Elissa gets to enjoy and immerse herself in the environment, helping to keep that passion alive and kicking. So thank you so much for joining us, Elissa. I'm going to hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eve. I'll just share my screen.
Perfect.
And let me know once that's working for you. How's that going?
Perfect. All
excellent.
Good.
Well, as always, thank you, Eve. I'm starting to really enjoy these warm chickens. I think it's a great way to hopefully let everyone know about these grants. And as Deb has already said, we're always available for some further one-on-one catch-ups. So this is just a bit of a starting point, and happy to take any calls or team meetings and things as groups want to. So yes, I'm going to follow on from Deb. There's obviously quite a bit of similarities in terms of how to apply for both our funding grants, and we do that deliberately so that it's as easy for groups to apply and understand as possible, as opposed to having a whole different suite of things to think about. So the feral cat management grants are a joint grant between DPIRD and Department of Biodiversity Conservation Attractions. So it's a good collaboration. And let's just make sure this is, yeah. So it's been running now, we're in the 4th year and the final year of the current sort of funding that we have available. So in the past 3 years, there's been $1.5 million distributed, and that's supported 13 community not-for-profit groups undertake feral cat management projects around WA. I always think it's nice to kind of just have a quick thing of what have we actually done and achieved to sort of help prompt us into the future. So as I said, it's a full year grant program, and this is our final year. So there is $500,000 available. At the moment, this is the last year, but hopefully you never know, watch this space. So the feral cat management grants are part of a broader WA feral cat strategy ranging from 23-28, and there are 3 key objectives that guide us, and that's what the grants are based on. So there is increase effective feral cat management to improve conservation outcomes for native species through a 10-year blind approach, continual improvements of methods and technologies for feral cat management through research and development. And then the third one is broaden social acceptability and awareness of feral cat management methods. So obviously your application would need to meet at least one or more of those objectives to be considered eligible. And this is just a quick little snapshot of the current projects that are up and running or about to be running, and sort of which objectives they met. So I think being community-based, it's a really great sort of place where you can do cross tenure, because you're not like some other organisations are very limited to only being able to do one type of property. whereas community can go across both or more, and also just being able to get that social acceptability of feral cat management out and about. Just for another quick snapshot, these are some of the locations of our current projects. So some are statewide, others are in the southwest zone, and then we've got sort of one further north. And depending, of course, where the locations are will kind of affect the methodology. So the stuff that you guys need to know: to be eligible, you need to be basically one of the not-for-profit organisations or that's incorporated, but there's also other categories there as well. So as Deb said before, guidelines are definitely your go-to. They'll provide some great detail about who can and who can't. One thing that's unique to the feral cat management grants is that we have a pre-submission meeting requirement. Now, we would love to do that for the other grants, but they're just huge, and you know, we do have to sleep occasionally and eat lunch. So, but for the feral cat management grants, being a smaller grants, we are able to do that. So if you're thinking about applying, you reach out. There's the contact details will be at the end of the presentation or on the guidelines, and you arrange a Teams meeting. That'll be with myself and usually a DBCA person as well. The whole purpose of that meeting is just to provide support, because what we want to do is not waste anybody's time, but also help you create the most sort of, give you some advice to being more robust and potentially being approved for funding. So that's for everybody. We do ask that you do the meeting before the 10th of April, just because between then and the closing date, things can get pretty hectic, but we do have some flexibility around that as well, because we appreciate sometimes you don't find out until a little bit later. So the closing date for this round is the same as the Community Stewardship grants round, so that's the 29th of April at 12 noon. So please make sure you get them in. We love reading and hearing about your applications. And there are no limits to how many applications you can put in, but clearly we've only got $500,000 available, so that's kind of the limitation. The other consideration about these grants that's different to the community stewardship grants is there's no sponsorship available for that, so you can't be sponsored by another organisation. So some key features I've already sort of mentioned about addressing one or more objectives of the feral cat strategy. Your application can be between $10,000 and $250,000 ask, and it can be up to 3 years. The assessment panel do look at and prioritise ones that have got good community-based commitment, landscape scale, tenure blind projects, looking at, obviously, it's all about reducing the impacts of feral cats for our native fauna and in priority areas. Now, and it's not a judgment call or anything, but because of these grants have been part of the feral cat management strategy, these are only available for feral cat management, not stray and domestic. If you would like to find out more about the definitions between what's considered a stray, domestic and feral cat, you can look up the DPIRD website, and on the guidelines we have a link to that as well, and there's the DPIRD cat policy, which gives some definition around that. Completely acknowledge the difficulties in working within that scope, but that's the space that we're working in. If you have a project where you would like to do feral cat management, but also look at responsible sort of domestic cat ownership and managing strays, the community stewardship grants does allow for that scope. So that's one thing to consider as well. If it's not quite meeting the guidelines for the feral cat management grants, check out the community stewardship grants. And there's nothing stopping you from applying for both grants. The assessment panel is the same, so you can virtually put in a very similar or same application into both without too much extra work, and the assessment panel obviously will look at one or the other, and you know, if you get approved for one, you're not going to get approved for the other one, so you won't get a double up of money, but that sometimes helps hedge your bets a little bit. In terms of activities, there's obviously feral cat management on-ground works. That can be a range of methodology. There's also research and development, and then community capacity and awareness building. Monitoring is seen as sort of a part of the projects because what we're trying to see is change to the native animals. So that's something to consider when you put your application in. And there's just a couple of examples there. There's some eradicat baits being sweated. That was for a north project. And then you have your floppy fencing that helps with the feral cats, felixes, and then also some communication engagement products that have been developed as well. Deb's already mentioned as well about the changes to limits. So from the 2025 round, there hasn't been any change to or increases to some of these salary on costs and coordination administration, but I just thought it's worth sticking up there as a bit of a reminder that they were sort of increased recently. So things to kind of consider that, I suppose, particularly for feral cats, there's obviously a lot of the control is lethal. So you really need to show the assessment panel that you understand and are aware of your legislation requirements, because the last thing we want to do is you accidentally kill next door neighbour's fluffy, and one, that's not good for the cat, but two, that's also not good for optics either. So you need to show you're responsible. Once again, the guidelines at the end, there's an appendix which has really helpful links to PestSmart standard operating procedures for a whole range of methodologies from trapping and shooting control and things like that. So in your application, reference those sort of documents or your understanding, also that you understand the difference between a feral cat and show how your project area is feral cats and not the tip where unfortunately that would be considered a stray cat because they're interacting with quite significantly with human sort of infrastructure. Other things is I think we're all starting to be more aware of the WA gun legislation, which changed recently. Once again, there's a great link or two in the guidelines, which can take you to some of the information pages there so you understand your requirements around getting the permits and things for that. The work plan is still your friend, whether it's community stewardship grants or it's feral cat management grants, particularly with the methodologies. It's really great to use the work plan to say how many weeks you're undertaking the control, how much effort is going into it, because depending on your scale of your project area, methodology really does change. So just for instance, up north where they're doing very large broad landscape area, the eradicat baiting is more appropriate, whereas if you're doing a much more targeted, smaller area for a particular vulnerable species, the felixa or the trapping may be more appropriate, or even a combination of both. So just thinking about your scale and understanding the methodologies, and that's where some of those links can help you if you're not too sure. The other thing I would say is reach out to DBCA because they're experts in what methods work in what areas, and they're usually pretty happy to help as well. So think about that as well. I did want to put in about co-contributions. So in your application, if you have, if you're going to the effort of getting letters of support or letters of contribution, a little tip to remember is that they should actually state the amount of contribution as a dollar amount, because it's the last thing you want to do is if you're successful having to go back to those groups and say, hey, we actually need the dollar amount in there as well. So even if it's in kind, they can just estimate what that is, put the value in there. We understand that they're estimates, but particularly more so for cash contributions, that really does. So that's just a little helpful tip to help stop you having to go back and upset any relationships that you have. Permissions, clearly if you're going to be doing lethal control, permissions is required. We do have a landholder template in the agreement, in the application form and later in the contracting. That doesn't have to, be completely filled out for the application. You can just have some, an email showing interest. But it's just be mindful that, once again, with lethal controls, there's things like you have to notify neighbours and all that sort of stuff. So just, once again, build that into your application, that you understand and you're aware of your requirements around that. And I've talked about methodology, but timing and availability of control methods. Definitely have a think about that. DBCA sort of let me know that for eradicat baiting, if you're interested in doing that, they have to put together, and I'm not an expert on this, but they have to put something together for their agency of how many baits they'll use in a year. And that includes, other groups like, that community groups and things like that. So just be aware that that process can take a little bit of time. So when you're putting your work plan and if you're going to do any baiting, allow for some time. So that's where reaching out to DBCA, asking for a bit more information and getting an understanding of that, so you can be sort of prepared for your timelines. Felixes, they can only be hired, and methylation only have a certain number, so there can often be a bit of a backlog of that. So yeah, definitely reaching out to them and understanding that. Okay. So just like the community stewardship grants, our assessment panel will assess the grants based on 4 selection criteria. 30% is about your clear methodology and showing that you're associated with one or more of the objectives. Please do really sort of emphasize the fauna values that you have in or around your project area. We don't know your area as well as you do, so don't assume that these, well, not me, so I won't be on the assessment panel, but don't assume they know. Tell that story, emphasize how important and the need for the works to occur in that area. The second one is that another 30% will be that evidence of the local community involvement for all phases, and that includes sort of consultation with Aboriginal people. A reasonable, well-justified funding request demonstrating value for money. I think Deb talked about that a bit before, so I won't go into that. And then a further 10% on sound planning and ability to manage the project. Really consider your resources. I know sometimes people really cut back on, say, the project officer because they're worried about value for money. But if it's got to the point where you can't undertake monitoring and you can't fulfill the duties because you're really just trying to pull back on that, the assessment panel do understand, and just create a bit of narrative around it and make sure you are adequately resourced for what you need to do. And that you're not overreaching your organisation. Really think about, if you're new to that space, maybe start out with a smaller project and build up later on. One thing I will mention about methodology as well, because we look at, or the assessment panel looks at, what is going to be effective management. Multi-year projects, when you're thinking about feral cat control, is probably going to be more effective than 1 year of control, and then all the neighbouring cats just go, oh, great, that territory is free, I'm going to jump in. Yeah, so just think about what's going to be the most effective methodology. Okay, your applications, as well as the assessment panel looking at them, prior to that, they are also reviewed by the Feral Cat Technical Committee, and they then provide advice up to the assessment panel as well. Okay, so I have the website address there if you're interested in having a bit of a look. Additional things that are on that website are a list of the successful applicants that were from 23 to 25. So if you want to get a bit of a feel of what's been kind of successful and what they've done, that can be sometimes a bit of a useful tip. And yeah, that will give you the link to the Smarty Grants page, where you can obviously then open up an application. And then finally, so yeah, our contact details are there. SNOMO email box, or give that number a call. And we definitely have that line up and running now. It is definitely working. So someone will contact you or get back to you if it goes to voicemail, we promise. All right, so that's me done. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Elissa. While everybody is marinating in their questions, is there anyone that has any initial burning questions for Elissa and Deb? Caroline, have you got one?
Yeah, I have. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I saw you unmute straight away, and I was like, Caroline.
I've got a few questions. Firstly, of Deb.
Yep.
With your move into the Climate Resilience Directorate, sorry, does that mean there is a focus in the assessment panel on climate resilience? And is there a specific objective in the guidelines that we have to address in that regard?
No, not at this stage. That might change because we're pretty new to that and we're all still figuring it out. At this point, just it's reasonably, it's mostly business as usual.
Yeah.
The guidelines are what you need to address, but no, not at this point. That may morph a little bit, but we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much time, but I've got two other very quick questions.
Go for it. That's a great question.
Support, you didn't mention anything about support from corporations or anything like that. I know there was a change last year, wasn't there, that you didn't require a letter of support from your traditional owners up front. Is that still the case?
Correct. Yeah, look, it's with the traditional owner engagement, it is really important that you do some sort of, reaching out or have a plan of how you will engage them. What we want to try and avoid is Aboriginal corporations getting hammered by a whole bunch of people, and then an expectation is raised as to that the money's coming and then it might not. So there's some frustration around that. So we're trying to sort of manage expectations. However, we do need to see what your plan might look like and how you're going to engage with them. For some of you, you might already have established relationships, so you just trot those out. But yeah, for others, if you don't, just tell us what that might look like and what the plan is.
Okay, my very quick third question, continuing projects. So if we've had money for two small projects over the last 3 years in one area and we want to do a third stage, is that generally looked upon as being beneficial, or is that, oh, you've had your money in that area, we want to give it to somebody else?
No, not at all. Look, I think that the secret is justifying why you need ongoing funding. But the second thing is showing how your current ask builds on your previous efforts. So showing that evidence to say we've done this, we've been really successful at this and this and this, but we've identified that there's ongoing effort required, one, or two, that there's a gap and we need money to fill that gap. So yeah, it's really about justifying, but absolutely you can continue to request funding.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks, Caroline. Jen, go for it.
Can't hear you, Jen.
You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Maybe there's some audio issues. Have you had a look in your audio settings?
Have you been using earphones? Maybe pop those in. No. Oh no.
Feel free to just type it out if you want.
All right. Maybe if anyone else has got any questions. Oh.
Yeah, I think she might just type it out potentially.
Okay.
Any other immediate questions?
Book a meeting, Jen.
In the chat.
Yep.
Book a meeting.
Thanks so much for the presentation. It was very helpful. We would be first-time applicants and just wanting to ask if it's necessary to have complementary funding, or whether that's a prerequisite to applying for financial support.
No, it's not. If you have other funds that you can, if you've got another grant or some other form of funding that you can contribute to this, that's great. But it's not necessary. Please make sure in the guidelines you look at the volunteer section. If you've got quite a few volunteers, there's a really great app done through Volunteers WA. It's a calculator, and there's a link to it in the guidelines, and that'll help you to sort of put a value around all the efforts that your volunteers do. It's kind of crazy when you actually put that in. It's sometimes a little bit shocking. You go, what is worth that much?
Yeah.
It's quite an eye opener. So put that in so you can get your co-contribution up quite easily with just your volunteer effort. But it is an essential.
Okay, well, that's great, because we've got quite a large voluntary contribution, a lot of pro bono work, etc., leading to the project launching. But our issue is our project is actually very remote. So we've got an Aboriginal partnership, and we've got a lot of their community that are part of the partnership as well. But it's not seen as you would say if you're in urban or regional, local areas where you get volleys to assist with the plantings, etc. It's a very different kind of piece. But this has been a fabulously helpful presentation. Thank you. I'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
Yeah, please do, and we can go through some of the detail.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnelly. Over to you, Lizzie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
A couple of quick questions. One of them is about travel costs. Is that going to be flexible at all? Because I know it's gone up to 88 cents a kilometre, but I've just had a quote for a workshop for a current project, it's gone up, and that's at 110 already. And I just think this affects everything. We're quite regional as well, and we've got people delivering workshops traveling from Perth, and that's sort of a 700k round trip. So I'm just wondering if that is maybe got some, I don't know, are you looking at that? Is it on your radar that these like a real cost that will affect us?
Look, I think particularly with the fuel crisis at the moment, we're going to have to look at that. But just justify it, Lizzie. Just put it, if you're putting in additional, obviously don't go too crazy, because you want to be, you want to cover your costs, but you don't want to, you still want to show value for money.
Can we do like a contingency sort of thing and go, we might does it?
Yeah, contingencies don't work well in this program. Just justify it. Just find a spot in the application, or particularly in the work plan, to say this is above the allowance, the limitations, because X, Y, Z. We can't not look at that with this current situation. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
And then my other one is also to do with guidelines, and we had this issue with current project, but it's to do around saltbush specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And we have massive salinity issues up here, so we have our whole project is going to be continuing salinity management, and it's a lot of re-veg, and we use saltbush all the time, regardless of whether farmers have livestock or don't. And I know we've had to justify that for our conditions before. And is it the same thing? If we're doing a big biodiverse mix and saltbush is part of it,
that's fine.
That's going to be fine. Yeah. Okay.
That's fine. It's when you have a monoplanting of saltbush that it starts to raise questions.
It's just a bit frustrating in the guidelines, because it specifically says saltbush is ineligible. And
just check. I've got a feeling I took that out. I'll just need to go back in and check.
Ineligible activities, I think, is in that section. But yeah, I thought I wanted to check. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we completely understand. What really helps is to show a species list, and then you can see quite clearly that they are just part of a biodiverse mix.
Yeah, well, we did that. That's 2 years ago, but it came back as one of the conditions that we did not use saltbush. And I think we had a meeting, Deb, and it just justified why we'd include it, and that was fine. Yeah, but just checking if it's basically the same thing. So that's good.
I'm just actually having a quick look at the guidelines now. But Jen, are you on?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Slight technical problems. Typical of being me. So I just have a question about the fact that in the guidelines this year it's saying that site prep will no longer be a funded activity, and I'm just we're potentially proposing to do like a tiered scale re-veg, trying to encourage blue sky re-veg projects. And we were initially going to include, like site prep as one of the those that are wanting to do better projects. I'm wondering whether weed control, because weed control is funded as a separate item. Obviously that's in a weed infestation situation. But is there capacity for that still within, where you are doing a revegetation site and you do have a significant weed burden? I'm just wondering if there's any, like you're saying about sort of justifying, if there's any room to wriggle around on that.
So site prep there's always been an expectation that that's the landholder's responsibility. That's not new. That's actually always been the case. However, like anything else in these guidelines, if the project actually calls for that, put it in, provide justification. There's no guarantee it will be funded, but if your justification is sufficient, we can look at it.
Okay, that's great. And just the other thing is, in that, blue sky thing, I'm thinking about within fencing, is there any capacity to include within that funding the wildlife gates, the kangaroo, wallaby? So, that.
Absolutely. Yep. Again, it's going to add to your cost, so justify it. It's going to probably tip you over the upper limit, so just justify it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No worries.
Oh, great questions. Caroline.
Sorry, I got another one. Watering, Deb. Watering's becoming more and more essential to survival of re-veg projects, and it can be quite costly unless you can get volunteers to do it. It's said in the guidelines that watering has to be the applicant's contribution. Is that right? We can't apply for money?
Yeah, look, this is a really tricky one. I'm going to be really honest with you. I still don't have any clear answer on that one. We understand that it's becoming more of an issue in a drying climate. However, we're still a little bit hesitant to provide that because, if a project's been well managed and you're planting at the right time, then ideally, winter rains, they'll be well established by the time. But that's changing. So yeah, I get it. I think, if it's really essential, particularly for certain sites, put it in. There's no guarantee it'll get up, but put it in and justify it. A well-justified argument around why you absolutely need something and provide evidence around that. If there's been a study that's been done, include that as evidence.
I think it's just becoming something that we all need to do through that first summer, and it's vital to the success of your project these days.
Otherwise, I get it, and it's a bit of a waste of seedlings if they're going to die.
Yeah.
But
maybe maybe not on the river in the southwest or down. But if you're working in Collie, for example, and it's dry as a bone in summer, those seedlings just will not survive if you don't do something.
Yep. Look, that's something we're going to have to look at. I think the other thing to consider, I'm going to be really frank with all of you, is we only have $7 million and we've only had $7 million for, 10 years. It's a lot of money, but when you consider we have to do the whole state and $7 million doesn't go as far as it did 10 years ago, that's part of the reason why we have some limitations on things to try and manage, that finite bucket of money. and make sure that it's, you know, being used as appropriately as we can manage. So yeah, look, I would suggest put it in, justify it really well. It's something that's on my radar and we're looking at it, but I don't have a clear answer for you at this point.
Mm.
I suppose increasing that bucket is what we all want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, but Deb.
Thanks, Caroline.
Is Jen still?
Yes.
Oh, Jen's got another one.
Yeah, I do have another one. Sorry, I forgot about the other one. I was another thing in the guidelines when I was reading it was a reference to. I'm assuming this is not something that's going to be a diehard thing for these big regional rural plantings, but the protection, the tree guard protection for the seedlings. I'm assuming that, you know, because I mean, if we're doing 5,000, 8,000 seedlings on one site with a farmer, he's not going to tree guard all of those, or he just won't do the project. So I'm assuming that there's a bit of room to manoeuvre there.
Oh yeah, it's horses for courses.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on why you're putting tree guards around too. If you're doing it to protect them from rabbits, we'd rather see rabbit control as part of your project, for instance. So it really depends on why you're doing it. Yeah, what is the purpose of the tree guards? You know, in an urban area, for instance, it's as much around visibility, so people don't walk over the top of the seedlings, so that they know that they're there.
We just saw it in the guidelines and hadn't noticed it before, so I wondered if it was something new that had popped up, and just wanted to clarify. But I assumed it would be that way, but I thought I better just check.
Yeah. Eve, if you don't mind, on page 17 of the guidelines as well, this is for who asked about the saltbush? It was Lizzie. Sorry, Lizzie. It's changed to revegetation that is predominantly for feed or fodder purposes that are ineligible. So I've changed that wording this year so that that addresses the thing around saltbush. So that might help you a little.
Which was that? Because it says in ineligible things, this does not include fodder species such as saltbush. That's on page 26.
26.
Yeah, I'm only going on about it because talking to one of the nurseries we're working with after that last round, they had other people with state NRM funding who had saltbush and had these same conditions. And I don't know if it did happen or not, but they were reconsidering even doing the project because of things like that. And so I think it's really important that it's right in the guidelines, because that is what we're going off. And everyone out there who's not in this meeting, you know, that's what they're reading.
Yep. Okay, that probably needs a little bit of rewording, because it's talking about saltbush and then monoculture plantings. So, you know, maybe that's a grammar thing, that putting saltbush in brackets monoculture plantings. So Lizzie,
that would be better. Yeah, I think
you'll be fine. I as I said, I have changed the ineligible bit. And I will, it's probably too late now, but I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, all right, good.
But thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions for Deb or Elissa? Otherwise, like they suggested, make an appointment, call them on the phone, send them an email. They're so approachable and contactable. Just wanted to quickly also put it to the group that we were thinking about potentially hosting a wordsmithing session for people to come together and work on their applications. As Deb's kind of hinted at, the session that we ran early on in last year, writing a compelling story for your application is so important. And it's something that people can struggle with. So we'd love to have a facilitator and come in and help out with that if people are interested. I'll put the details to that in our post-event resources, and you can just let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. But I think we are good for now. I can't see any more questions in the chat.
I think given that we're kind of running out of time. If you don't mind, Eve, I'll just reiterate, if you want to have a one-on-one, which is probably the easiest way, even if it's just a 10, 15-minute conversation to clarify anything that's not clear for you. Yeah, please do. Yeah, we can work through your ideas, any queries you've got, and if you are advanced enough that we can look at your draft application, we can have a look at that. And I include Liz in that. It's the royal we. So Elissa's also available for the feral cat stuff, and she knows that project inside out.
Amazing. So cool. Well, I'm also conscious of time as well, Deb. You're very right. Just wanted to quickly say as well, we have our new website up and running. If you haven't already had a look, please do go and have a look. And if you're a member, please make an account so you can access all of the updated resources and all of the new features that we have in there. We've been working really hard on this project over the last year, and we can't wait to see what you as the network think of it. We'll also be providing some training on the ins and outs of the new features in the coming weeks, delivered by our lovely Landcare Expertise Exchange facilitator, Vanessa, who's on the call with us today. And if you're not already a member, we would love you to join this incredible network, and we would love to have you. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a lovely rest of your week and a restful weekend. And thank you so much, Deb and Elissa. That was a fantastic session.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
Look forward
thank you.
to speaking to you all maybe sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.